things. We want to connect this idea of celebrating culture and increasing understanding and building bonds of respect, right? And as we do those things, we're talking about 5 major pillars. We call these the 5 foundational pillars of life. That's arts and entertainment, economic development, financial literacy, health and wellness, and spirituality. Now, we'll be honest, I sprinkle in a lot of political talk along the way because it encompasses all of those 5 pillars. So thank you so much for pressing play and tapping in with Bird's Eye View Media and also Spoken from a Bird's Eye View. Let's go ahead and take flight. To the 3rd episode of Spoken from a Bird's Eye View podcast, where tonight we're going to talk about some major topic areas. So thanks for pressing play and tapping in and taking flight with me. On tonight's episode, we're going to talk about interest rate hikes. We're going to dive into some conversation about Talib, Kweli, Dave Chapelle, and Yasiin actually starting a podcast. We're going to take a look into 50 Cent's new deal. We're going to talk about the versus battle and the huge lawsuit at hand. We're going to talk about Dr. Fauci, who's set to retire. FN Mecca, the artificial intelligence artist that was signed by Capitol Records. And also the Mar-a-Lago Trump debacle. So thanks for pressing play and tapping in. Let's jump into it. Don't forget to follow us across the board on all social media platform sites. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. That'll be Bird's Eye View Media LLC. And also you can find us on Spotify and Anchor at Spoken from a Bird's Eye View podcast. Want to thank you in advance for all your support. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share. And also just help me share all this beautiful message. Yeah, good people. Welcome back. This is the 3rd episode of Spoken from a Bird's Eye View podcast. We're going to have a good time today. Without any further ado, we're going to dive right into it. The subject matter at hand. I don't know if y'all heard about it, but I heard about it, and I'm geeked, as you can tell. I'm going to dive right into it. The details of it in our arts and entertainment pillar. Man, let's talk about it. Dave Chapelle, Talib, Kweli, Yasiin. What are they going to do? They're set to host a new podcast together. Now, this is significant because as you see, everybody's in the podcast flavor, myself included. It's inspiring to see such great inspirational figures, especially our celebrity figures, diving into the podcast game. My hope is just that they leave a little room and space for people like myself so I could keep climbing these rungs and ladders and keep sharing my thoughts and ideas with the world and, just opening up conversation. But I'm just equally as inspired by just the big inspirational push by these celebrities of late. I mean, Joe Budden set the tone, but it just seems like since Joe Budden kind of set that tone, Lord have mercy, everybody's jumping in the podcast game. But no worries, it's all good news, especially when you're talking about the culture. You're talking about significant events that are happening across the world. And in this case as well, they're talking about fashion. So I'll tell you some of the details. So the Midnight Miracle, that's the name of the podcast. It's going to premiere on the Luminary platform later this year. And how it's structured this year is set up with 3 hosts. So one being Talib Kweli, the other being Joe Budden, and then lastly Yasiin. Now, the podcast called The Midnight Miracle is set to premiere in the coming weeks on the Premier Podcast Network Luminary. And it's described as a saloon-style show. And it's going to give the listeners an insight onto their personal lives. And it's going to feature guests as far as some of the nation's most influential cultural icons. And that's really what's going to bring their audience as far as them tapping into the nation's cultural icons. Now, Dave Chapelle went on to say that making a podcast, it wasn't an obvious next move for him, but it was the right moves. So Chapelle said in a press release that the podcast is really going to give us a look into how they process the world around them. And really, he said that it's going to change the way that viewers think the way a podcast could be. Now, keep in mind, this trio, they edited more than 100 hours of content for this podcast. And the episodes, they're going to trickle out, very frequently over the next couple months. But But the Midnight Miracle is also going to feature a soundtrack, right? Music by Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, D'Angelo. So, they really ramping this up. And I'm really liking what I'm hearing, especially with so many celebrities getting into the podcast space. I definitely wanted to see, just what level of creativity and just what level of sponsorship and what level of, exposure they were going to be able to tap into with the podcast industry. So I'm just excited. I'm seeing a huge proliferation. I'm seeing a huge proliferation as far as the YouTube podcasting. As you see, that's something I'm getting on the way myself. But really, as far as just this podcast industry, just making sure that we're sharing stories that are, just inspirational ideas from across the nation and the world. But more importantly, that we're, keeping that conversation going, but a healthy conversation. So the thing with the celebrities getting into this marketing space is just that I hope this space doesn't become so overcrowded and top heavy that, to the point that average people like myself, that we don't get looks or views or, if you will, listens. Because really going back to what, what they said about tapping into the nation's most influential cultural icons, really, that's a space that really a large part of these podcasts want to tap into. We just may not have such influence, but we're growing our audience and we're getting our audience to that point. So, I'm mad thrilled to see the celebrities dive into the space and, sharing their life stories and just sharing, the things that inspire them. And most importantly, just their stories, some of the traps they fell into and some of the pitfalls, and all of this is important, without us getting too nosy and getting all, into the intricacies of their life. But wow, just talking about some dope stuff, and I'm looking forward to the Midnight Miracle. But in the meantime, until that Midnight Miracle comes, I have a good space for you here on Spoken from a Bird's Eye View podcast. So, just stay chiming into the stories, stay pressing, tapping in and pressing play and listening. And as we take flight, as we, the motto, help those on the path of enlightenment through connection by media, by celebrating culture, building bonds of respect, and increasing understanding. Now, you might ask yourself, why is a person like me so thrilled about a podcast from those three individuals? Well, come on now. It's those three individuals. That's the reason why. Talib Kweli, in 2020, in August 2020, he was suspended from Twitter for apparently breaking the rules, as we call. So, a 24-year-old activist accused him of incessantly tweeting her, so sometimes for 12 straight hours. So one thing for sure, we know Talib Kweli is very outspoken. He's going to tell you what's on his mind. He's going to tell you his thoughts. And you find that by way of his music, very different music. He's not caught up in the mainstream as far as keeping up with the Joneses, or in this case, selling the most records. He's more concerned with spreading his message and more or less making sure that he's around, or he's surrounding himself with people that think like himself, or, elevating, the thoughts of people around him, So that's the exact same thing for Dave Chapelle. Come on now. You see this guy stand-up comedy sketches? Have you seen him, agitate the LGBT and transgender community? So can you just imagine the subject matter and the topics that those two are going to dive into, and just some of the reactions they're going to receive from people, and just Yasiin Bey there to anchor it? Wow. So really, it's just the fact that those are individuals. The reason why I like this is just the fact that those are individuals that could tap into, subjects that are, if you will, taboo or less frequently wanting to be talked about by individuals. But really, it's the idea of their commentary and just the way they think about things and the way they approach things. That's what's really going to be a game changer for that type of podcast. So, I don't know about you, but I'm beyond thrilled. And, I'm laughing early, because, hopefully, think about it. Let's be real. We live in a cancel culture. So, I could just see in the first 3 months them talking about something where, the internet is just going to go crazy. And, they might want to cancel the show. But we can't cancel the show because those are some outspoken individuals, but really outspoken in a good way that gets you thinking. And, much like myself with, Spoken from a Bird's Eye View podcast, getting our minds going and getting our minds racing. And if you will, food for thought. I'm excited for that type of podcast. So the Midnight Miracle is going to be pretty dope, man. It's going to be a miracle at midnight, if you will. So looking forward to it all, man. Wow, you want to know another cool thing about the Dave Chapelle, Yasiin Bey and Talib Kweli podcast, right? Another cool thing about that Midnight Miracle is the fact that it's going to be released on vinyl, right? So they already have a soundtrack. They have the podcast, and now it's going to be released on vinyl. You talk about game changing. You talk about like just doing something unique, and not just unique for just unique purposes, right? Just for the sake of doing something different. But you talk about just a different element, right? So I appreciate like I said earlier, their contributions to the podcast industry, right? A soundtrack, vinyl, those three like controversial, like, man, like politically stern voices. Epic, right? Epic. This is what I mean by the direction we could take the podcast. Amazing stuff. Wow. So taking a look at our health and wellness pillar, as well as a little bit of a sprinkling in of that politics, which I mentioned about. Recent news, Dr. Anthony Fauci has said he's going to step down in December to pursue his next chapter in life. So Fauci, wow, this guy he's extended 7 presidents, right? So he has been the advisor as far as our health initiatives and platforms for 7 different presidents, right? So at this point in time, I guess he's had enough, and enough is enough. And I guess COVID wore him out just as much as it wore many of us out. He's saying at the end of December, he's going to be stepping down to pursue the next chapter in life. So he's hinted at this for quite some time. I was actually surprised beyond Obama that he was still serving as far as that top doctor or top medical expert as far as our public health and our public service. But he's going to be stepping down as far as December. So that's going to leave a vacuum, if you will. Now, very controversial because a lot of people were not adamant fans of Fauci, especially, COVID and post-COVID, and I would say during COVID and post-COVID. So the fact that he's stepping down, and then also the fact that we still seem to have a large part of these infectious diseases and, just things kind of lingering around, whether that's at this point in time COVID, or whether that's H1N1, or whether that's the monkeypox, or whether that's I heard an idea of polio being back into the airways. So it's just a very trying time that we still are in. And, to see that, one of the top virologists, if you will, and the top medical experts over the past 50 decades is now going to be transitioning. At some point he had to retire, right? But it just goes to show that we still are not out of the thick of the woods. In fact, we are, kind of in the middle of this journey, if you will. And I'm hoping that the next individual is someone that's just as strong as Fauci, because Fauci received a lot of slack. Like, let's be honest, let's be real. Especially, Ebola with President Obama, what's now, so it's just, he's over, I could definitely say over the past, 12, 13 years, he's received a lot of slack, almost equally as much as the president, right? With such proliferation and significant rates of these infectious diseases and things rolling around. So it's going to be a void, and we're definitely going to need a strong individual to fill that void. So They said Fauci, he caught a lot of slack, but he was great at the job he did, and we're gonna miss him. But also, just even, besides that, the rollout of COVID and all of that stuff, and just really, was the government behind it? So that's debatable and stuff like that. But what I can say is during his time of being in office, and especially his leadership as we dealt with COVID, we needed an individual strong like himself. And whether or not COVID is real, or whether or not, these infectious diseases that we seem to have around are real, no matter what side of the aisle you fall upon, and no matter what side of the, the conversation you fall upon as far as that's concerned, one thing for sure, whether you're sick or you've never been sick, it seems to be out there, right? So that's why I say we need a strong leader, whether that's a Republican leader, whether that's a Democratic leader, no matter the case, we need a strong leader, because these infectious diseases seemingly here to stay, or seemingly here to camp out for a while. If they're not here to stay, they don't want to go easily. We'll put it that way, right? So I don't know what's in store, because of course we have the November election, and then we're going to have some transitions taking place as far as House of Representatives, Senate seats, and things of that nature going into January. So with him transitioning out in December, we're going to need that good individual immediately, because we can't afford a transition or a break, if you will, without a top medical expert providing that direction, and kind of buffering these media outlets' viewpoints on a large part of what's going on. So man, we're not out the water, people, and keep your eyes and ears open to that one. And I'm definitely going to keep my eyes and ears open to it, and I'm going to definitely make sure I continue to talk about that subject matter, because that's one of those things can't be swept under the rug. Too important. Now, my next article and story is going to take a look back into our arts and entertainment pillar. And this time we're taking a gander, if you will, at the recent developments as far as Swizz Beatz and Timbaland. So Swizz Beatz and Timbaland are set to sue Triller, right? And if you've been living under a rock over the past couple years, maybe perhaps you have, but definitely when COVID started, a huge fuss and a huge gathering was centered around the versus battles. So it brought an excitement back to music at a time when we could not go to music concerts and festivals and venues and just tours and things of that nature. So it brought that excitement to the virtual aspect as far as music and technology, and seeing our biggest artists compete against each other, song for song, hit for hit, if you will, album for album, right? And it became a big cultural phenomenon over the past couple years. Now, it was spearheaded by Timbaland and also Swizz Beatz. They came up with the idea, according to them, years before they even actually put it into the versus battle due to COVID, okay? Now, even when it first rolled out during COVID, I was like, brilliant, I have you, brilliant people, brilliant, this is great. And it was those things that I was hoping at the time and at the moment, us as melanated people, right, would hold on to. I was praying and hoping that it would not be one of those things that we sell. And I'll give you a few examples of those things that we sell. BET, Black Entertainment Television, right? Sold, right? Profitability, margin, right? Upside, Vitamin Water, another company, sold, profitability, margin, upside. Beats by Dre, sold, profitability, margin, upside. So when this idea of versus was rolled out, I was like, yes, maybe one thing that we could hold on to and continue to pour into and continue to build and continue to nurture as our own and continue to share with other cultures and societies, but make sure it's housed within. Did not happen, good people. That was wishful thinking, and that was just, we'll leave it at that. Wishful thinking and just optimistic thoughts on my part and my behalf. Surely behold, Timbaland and Swiss Beats sold the rights of Versus to Triller. And now they're up in arms because Triller, the music producing or music hosting platform, is just not paying, right? So according to these headlines, it says here that they're suing Triller after a short form video platform allegedly failed to make the $28 million payment for the acquisition of their live music face-off series Versus, right? So they're saying that Triller has not made payments since January. We are in the latter part of August and September at this point in time. So just goes to show, like, this is why it's so important for certain things in the culture and to remain in the culture, right? Let us develop those. Let us nurture those as babies without just first buyers or second buyers or even third buyers in that case. Buyers coming and you selling it off. Let it be something that we appreciate. Let it be something that we could continue to visit and continue to put on a pedestal for a while before you just decide to sell it off and realize profits, and then it becomes commercialized and then it's just not the same anymore, right? Let's take pride in our culture. Let's take pride in our creations. Let's take let's spend considerable time on further developing those before we offshoot them and let other people develop those. It's time, people, which kind of leads to my next thing that I want to talk about, which is the FN Mecca, right? So Capitol Records signing the artificial intelligent artist FN Mecca, right? So he was only signed for the greater part of a day, 24 hours, 36 hours, if you will, and he was immediately dropped. And I think it was a brilliant idea by Capitol Records to drop him, right? They tried it. They wanted to step off into, the artificial intelligence and the metaverse, if you will, that kind of industry, but as they really said, the label had a diversity problem. It was controversial. So the artificial intelligence rapper FN Mecca, now he wasn't created by Capitol Records. That's the key thing to point out. He was signed by Capitol Records. So other individuals have already created this artificial intelligence rapper, but Capitol Records just thought it was brilliant to sign him and tap into that stream. Now the reason why they decided to drop him is because they said it was an insensitive move on their part in retrospect, but also he was racially ambiguous looking guy of a rapper, but keep in mind he was saying racial slurs as far as the nigger word, right? So they decided to drop him because that was just like a slippery slope. But besides that being the slippery slope, the point that I'm wanting to drive home is, why do we need an artificial rapper when we have real rappers talking about real life things? I'm talking about a wide range of emotion. It spans the full gamut of human emotion. So why do we need the artificial rapper that getting his raps from a real rappers or real people, or even getting their raps from the computer program that's creating the raps, and then an artificial rapper is presenting those and performing those? Why do we need that? That's insensitive. But besides it saying the nigger words, it's insensitive to a culture and a society and a group which is pouring out their emotions, especially when we talk about the creation of hip-hop. We're talking about pouring out their emotions as far as how we live and the way we are living and the way we want to live, right? So that's insensitive to that group of people who created an art form and a movement, if you will, from struggle, right? And now the fact that technology has caught up to that struggle, now we want to make that struggle a profitability margin and use technology to do it. Now, it's beautiful on one hand, because the technology is to this point. It's just as vast at this point, but it's extremely insensitive, and as they mentioned, it's unconventional and it's untimely, if you will. Maybe 100 years from now, maybe 200 years from now, when society is better across the board as far as even recognizing, the significance of rap and hip hop, and just even the message that was behind the creation of rap and hip hop. Until we get to that point, I don't think that we could actually have an artificial intelligence rapper that's replacing real rappers, right? Taking away their streams, right? And even at this point, creating raps that are mirrors or duplicates of the raps that are already being created. Nah, it's too insensitive, and that's just too much. So Capitol Records, shout out to you for trying. Shout out to you for realizing that your try was a fail and reeling that back before it just got too much. So as far as the YF or FN Mecca, if you will, it just speaks volumes to the insensitivity of this space of eventually pushing rappers out of their trade, right? So rappers have to go on tour. They have to go into the studios. They have to perform, right? They have to do video shoots and things of that nature. So just to create a virtual rapper and actually receive profit margins from that rapper, especially on these streaming websites, to receive those profit margins and those airplays, that's a disservice. That's a disservice when there's people out here really with boots to ground, microphones and lips and voice boxes to microphones, and just, eyes and ears as far as in video cameras, right? And, sleepless nights as far as creating lyrics and verses and songs. No sirree, Bob. But even beyond that, as I previously mentioned, it's a slap in the face to the culture, the struggle of the culture, and the message behind the creation of that sound, that wave. It's a slap in the face. We can't celebrate 49 years of hip hop with that kind of rollout. No, sir. And to be honest with you, it's evident of the slippery slope as far as this digital artist or artificial intelligent creation, because even look at it, the real rapper or artist behind the FN Mecca, as they proclaim, is Cal Hooligan. So Cal Hooligan is in a huge back and forth with Capitol Records at this moment, saying that they're not giving him credit for the music which he wrote, or the lyrics and sound which he, like I said, the music which he wrote, but still is a credit to the FN Mecca. So can you imagine how down the road that could be something that balloons and blossoms to, affect larger artists or bigger artists that are, much like the Cal Hooligan, right? So whereas these artists, they're not credited for their work, right? But the record labels are able to benefit from the streams and the plays as far as on these streaming platforms, but not giving the real artist the credit as far as writing the lyrics, right? So it just, you see how that slippery slope could present itself, and it's just, hey, it's not worth it. So get out while you're ahead, Capitol Records. Get out while you're ahead. Smart deal. Now, earlier today, we're going to venture back into our arts and entertainment pillar. And also, this is going to venture a little bit, if you will, into our economic development pillar. And I want to show the connection between these things and why I bring up these things and why they're so important. So earlier today, I was speaking a little bit about this idea of Swiss Beats and what's his name? Timberland selling off verses to Triller, right? And I was going through the various examples of stories over time, which we've heard of melanated people creating a company and then eventually selling it off, right? So I said, 50 Cent with Vitamin Water, Dr. Dre as far as the Beats by Dre, BET, the Black Entertainment Television. But here is an opportunity or a time where 50 Cent did something a little different, right? And this is where we connect the arson entertainment with the economic development. So 50 Cent is now a resident of the Houston, Texas area. Okay, so it's no longer in New York, born and raised New York, kind of got his music career underway and rose to great fame and notoriety, and then was able to transition into the film industry, right? But now he's picked up and relocated to the Texas area, right? Now, of recent, he has actually paired up with the Houston Texans organization, NFL franchise, and he's going to now bring his foundation and cognac brand into the Houston, Texas arena, right? So he's going to be able to sell his cognac brand, essentially be a vendor, right? And sell his cognac brand to the Houston, Texas stadium so that way his cognac brand could be available at the bar, right? Beyond that, he's pairing up as far as his foundation to do great service with the Houston Texans, right? Houston Texans, right? So that's an example of what I meant by earlier, right? So this is where arson entertainment, or this is where just the melanated community could actually put themselves in a position opposed to selling off our ideas and just receiving a one lump sum or perhaps a residual payment, if you will, but you still sold it off. You don't have ownership. Instead of selling it off, keeping it, right? And instead of selling it, do a partnership with these other companies, right? This is what I mean. So, and in essence, what it does, it helps you as an individual economically and financially, as far as your family and, things of that nature to, bring stability. But it also helps the melanated community, because we're not in a position where we're trading off the things which could bring more notoriety, right, to us, to our cause, right? And it gives us that platform and it gives us that foundation to continue to do those things, right? So I tip my hat to you, 50 Cent. That was one time you did get it right. You did get it right. And you're doing amazing, wonderful things as far as, your collaborations with ABC Network and Stars Network, as far as the production value of the content in which you're creating, with your Power Book, and then just your other TV series and, the music and everything. So this is where I say, I tip my hat to those individuals which are leading the way and showing us the way to do it, in a good way, right? Where it's not just make your creation, sell off the creation. Sometimes it's make your creation, nurture that creation, nurture it a little bit more, partner with other companies and small up and coming, individuals and entrepreneurs, pair with bigger companies and corporations, right? And get that notoriety. So this is one of those examples where I say, you know what, you're doing it right. So this is where that melanin is woke. Shout out to you, 50 Cent. So stepping into our political pillar, you know it. We had to talk about it. And it's the unprecedented precedents that's been set by a former president. Yes, you know it, Donald Trump. So, wow, my mind is like, talking about blown. Like the Mar-a-Lago, oh my, like so much is rolling out. Where should we start? Let's just start with the idea of a former president having top secret, and confidential files at his residence, which is, ironically enough, a resort, a hotel resort, right? So, not even considering the fact that these documents are, like I said, top secret. We'll take away the confidential, okay? So top secret and secret. The title alone kind of speaks volumes, right? Top secret. That means only certain individuals have this certain security clearance to even view these documents, right? That's most important. even if we spill over then from that point and then move over to our secret documents. So maybe now at this point, a larger pool of people have access to those documents, right? Doesn't make it any better across the board because there's still 85%, 90% of the world can't view those documents. So for the former president to now, get this marginally moral victory as far as the judge acknowledging the fact that he could get the master to review the documents for executive privilege. Besides that point, okay, it's just, why did you take these documents, and what was your intentions with the documents, and why do you feel as though at this point in time, by you taking the documents, they were automatically declassified at that point in time? Like, why would you want top secret and secret documents in your presidential library, so to say, right? And if you're so, in this case, you look up to President Obama so much that you wanted to actually do a presidential library much like himself, why didn't you get in contact with the presidential library team that's helping him at this point in time with his library, right? And almost in a sense replicate the exact same blueprint, right? Obama, when he left office, I'm quite sure he didn't take boxes and boxes and boxes of secret and top secret and confidential documents to put on display in his presidential library. Like, it's just bizarre. So, as I mentioned, now he's had the opportunity to have this executive, the master to review as far as the executive privilege is concerned. But the legal ramifications of that is even bizarre as well, because it's just like, how can a former executive exercise executive privilege on the executive branch, right, and the judicial branch that are actually looking into misbehavior, possible legal ramifications as far as what you did leaving office? Like, how do you apply executive privilege? Which in turn leads to my point of, wow, we just gave power to the wrong individual. So now on the backside of things, or even during it, as we saw as well, by Trump having that power, he's rewriting all of the rules across the board. If you recall, when I first started this segment, I said the unprecedented precedents being set by former presidents. So he's rewriting all the rules across the board. It's just mind-boggling to me that would even put him in a position to think that, you know what, on my way out of the office, I'll go ahead and I need those boxes. I'll go ahead and take those boxes with me. That looks like a great wall in my presidential library on the West Wing. Like, it's just bizarre that someone even could think that way, and his team, if you will, could bag him up as well. But it has happened, and here we are. But besides, if we take a moment to step outside of the documents, right? And then him trying to skirt or scurry around the idea of why he even had to have the documents in the first place. Remember I said about this on presidents that's being set? Really, the presidents that's being set is this idea of, we're in big shit, we're in deep shit, right? Because at this point in time, how long might it take for those investigators to do their thorough investigation to see possibly what eyes that were not provided the proper clearance, whether that's top secret clearance or secret clearance, or even in that case confidential clearance to view some of those documents, and if they have viewed those documents, just kind of like what that means for national security. Beyond that, why did you feel as though you want to take these national security top secret documents to a place where they're not in the National Archives being protected and looked over, right? So it's just the spillover of these possible eyes and ears and hands that have touched that and heard about the document and even viewed the document. That's the real legal ramifications, right? And then, who might be in a position to to be, bribed, if you will, to sell some of that information, to release some of that information, or discuss some of that information even further. And it may not happen, 2 months from now. It may happen 2 years from now. Heck, it may even happen 20 years from now. But still, the legal ramifications of just uncandid move by our former president. So this is the kind of stuff that we must be wary of, right? Even if it gets to the point where, it's acknowledged that maybe he did have the legal jurisdiction to take the documents, it's just setting a bar and an example that it just opened floodgates, I fear, across the board. But that's not all. So it's still going on, still developing. And you know what? I will say this about President Trump. Like, for an individual like himself, like, I would just steer clear of any kind of sticky situations, right? Because it's apparent that almost in a sense people want to catch him with his hand in a cookie jar, right? Right? So he may feel as though the Democrats are picking on him. He might feel as though non-Republican voting constituents and citizens are picking on him. But it's just like, man, like, for real, they think you're dirty. So if they really on you like that, why not steer clear for a while? Even if you're not dirty, steer clear for a while. So then that way, high tides level out after a while, right? So just steer clear of national headlines, I would say. Steer clear of, the top headline. Just steer clear of controversial topics and subjects and even controversial acts. That's what I would do for a while, right? But wow. The more we know. We'll come back in a moment, people. So, venturing into our economic development pillar and also our financial literacy pillar, we're taking a look at an anticipation for a third federal interest rate hike. And it's looking like it may be another 0.75 of a percentage point. So we're definitely treading over the 2% target rate as far as the inflation target rate. Now, my big thing with creating Bird's Eye View LLC and also this Spoken from a Bird's Eye View platform is to be able to connect with individuals on layman terms or basic terms, if you will, or just kind of like use terminology which we all understand. So be able to connect with those that need to use the big words or jargon, if you will, but also be able to connect with those who, they don't reading is not their thing, right? They're not scholars from a standpoint of I'm not trying to learn a new word to use. So as I break down some of these complicated subject matter, stay with me, right? Because it's important, because as we run away from some of this subject matter, we still remain lost and confused, right? So I know this financial literacy topic and just, topic areas around politics and finance, it could be a little worrisome at times. But like I say, stick with it, right? So essentially what the Fed is trying to do, Jerome Powell is trying to do, seemingly to me, is combat the demand of inflation at this point in time, right? So if we know anything about business, supply and demand, right? Where there's supply, where there's demand, there's supply, right? There should be efficient supply, right? And where there's adequate supply, you could boost that out, to boost the demand. Where there's, lack of demand, you're sitting on an abundance of supply, right? You're not able to move your product, right? So that seems to be the problem at this point in time, economically, as far as in America and across the globe. At first, it was this idea of there wasn't enough supply, right? And there was a huge demand. And that's still where we are at this point in time. There's not enough supply, but there is a demand. So what I notice in these interest hikes is they're seemingly trying to bring down that demand, right? So cost of things going up, so it's still a demand, it's still a huge demand, and the supply is down, right? So if I raise these interest hikes or these interest rates, this demand that is still there is still taken in consideration, and it's still making you kind of stop and think, well, this demand that I think I have, or this demand that I think I need, is this demand really true, right? Or what are the other more important things in life that I really demand and need, right? So it kind of helps to bring down that inflation, almost in a sense, to bring it down to that 2% inflation level, which is the more ideal, right? So we're looking into, potentially going into that third 3/4 of a percentage point hike, as anticipated, and it's looking like it may come at the latter part of this month. In fact, so just to read a little bit more, they're acknowledging the spending and production has softened, and then also the inflationary impact of rising energy and food prices due to the Russia-Ukrainian war. They're basically saying that's beyond reach, but at the same time, we're trying to actually slow the demand side of the economy, which I just mentioned. And the big question is how high rates will need to go to restore the price stability, right? So that's really what it's all about, price stability, so that everything is just not all over the place, right? And we could kind of get a hold of that gross domestic product, whereas the value of things that we're producing are bringing back some profitability to the nation, right? So that's really what I'm seeing. So we're anticipating that another hike, and that's what it's looking like. And it makes sense that we're going to get that other hike, because inflation is treading way higher than the actual 2% limit. In fact, right now they're saying we're looking at about, rates are trading at about 3.4%, opposed to the 2.0% that they were looking for. So that would make sense. This would be the third hike, 3/4 of a percentage point. If this is the third one, percentage point 1, percentage point 2, that's 1.5 percentage points. So that's about the 1.5, which we are over at this point in time, over the 2.0. So it just, man. So I bring all that up to say, still we are not out of the water financially as far as this is concerned, with our own national inflation, and just kind of like prices going through the roof. But it also goes to show that it's important to save money, right? So, don't spend every ounce of your paycheck if you could, right? If you could, because it appears that we are still in this bear market. And when I say the layman terms, when I say bear market, a bear market just means it's a good time to buy, because the costs across the board, perhaps, as far as some of those stocks are down. So, buy low, sell high. So it gives you an opportunity during this bear market to get yourself, into the stock market, if it's a thing that you're not so much familiar with, to kind of play around, So anticipate, maybe, losing a little money, if you will, if you don't know anything about it, but take that on stride, right? But also anticipate the opportunity to make a large amount of money if you're able to, get some of those low hanging fruits as far as those low stock markets at this point during this bear market, and sit on those as they rise up and go into the bull market, right? So the bull market is a rising market, right? So really just across the board, take advantage of these inflationary times. Be smart about it. Don't spend all of your paycheck. Invest a little bit if you can into the stock market. Invest a little bit into your 401k, your Roth IRA, whatever the case may be. Sit on those for a while. Let them ride up. but then also be very alert as far as what's going on with them, because if you need to, exercise a trade option where, a limit sale where this it hits a bottom price, you want to get it off before it continues to go down. So this is why I mean it's a great time to still be involved in the stock market and learn some of this financial literacy. It's just important that you're tapping into the right people and getting the right understanding. So here at Spoken from a Bird's Eye View, this will be a great space as well to learn about some of those financial literacy pillars and just get a better understanding. But overall, it seems that we are going toward yet another interest rate hike, and it seems that interest rate hike is to really combat the demand, because we at this point in time we still don't have the. That's all I have for you people. So remember, until the next time my voice meets your ears, no matter what's your vantage point, no matter what's your perspective, always seek to harmonize this world by celebrating culture, increasing understanding, and building bonds of respect. Over and out, people. Till next time. Bird's Eye View, Melanin that's woke. Love. Whew.